Secondary color correction refers to changing the color or tonality of a region within a clip. That is, let's say just the sky, or an object, or an article of clothing, something like that. So I'm going to show you several methods in this lesson. So go to Working Files, double click on that, open up Projects, and scroll on down to 1106 Secondary Color Correction. Now some effects have a secondary color correction option, so I want to look at that first. I'm going to make this active over here, go to Effects, and I want to show you Fast Color Corrector and Luma Curve. Now we've worked with both of those guys. If you look at Fast Color Corrector and scroll down here a little ways, you will see no option for secondary color correction. The two main color effects that have secondary color correction options are the three-way color corrector and RGB curves. So I'm going to delete this one for now. Luma Curve, however, does have that option. So we're going to use Luma Curve first, and then it kind of introduces you to the whole subject. Here we've got Luma Curve, and it's got this secondary color correction group down here. You open it up, and it opens up a whole lot of stuff. What you do with secondary color correction is that you select some area within the clip based on hue, saturation, and luma. And then any changes you apply using the Luma curves will affect only that selected region. So we're going to select this bright area of the mountain, which is just a bit too bright, I think. I'm going to bring down just the bright area of the mountain. So I'm going to click on this little eyedropper tool to make a selection. So I can see what I've selected. I need to turn on this mask. So I click that. And right now you get this white blank slate. Don't panic. It's no big deal. You need to define the area that you're going to mask. So I click on the eyedropper tool, and once I do that, it turns everything back on and says, okay, what area do you want to select? What area do you want to designate as the area you want to fix? So I'm going to click on the snow here and click on that. And then that should add some of that area to our mask. Now you can probably barely see that there are a few little white dots there that are now defining the area that we're going to fix. But usually one click with the eyedropper tool is not enough. You got to go back and click it again. So I click on the eyedropper tool with a plus sign. I want to add to my selection now. You click on another white area here. That expands the area that we're selecting. It expands this mask that we're creating of the stuff that we want to work on. And that may be enough here. If I click on this a few more times with the plus sign, it probably won't make much difference. Now we need to further define this using these three things down here, hue and saturation. Let me scroll down here to get luma and luma. We're going to define that area a little bit more precisely using these guys. And right away you're going, wow, look at all this stuff here. What these guys do is they define the area that falls into the mask as you've selected it. So you've selected this stuff, believe it or not. You've selected that hue range, that saturation range, and that luma range. It's very bright. It's pretty much unsaturated. And we've got that wide range for hue because it's white. So we want to sort of expand this if we can, include more things in it. If we try to expand it based on hue, it probably won't go too much different because it's already white. Let me just drag this to the left. These little squares here indicate what's in the region. The triangles indicate what's kind of falling off at the edges to make it kind of a soft choice. Drag it to the left there, and you can see we expanded just a little bit there. But let me look at saturation. Drag this to the right a bit. We got some more stuff now. We're adding to the selection, which is good. We're increasing the scope of that mask. So all this stuff that's white will be included in our work. We changed luma to the left a little bit to include more areas that are bright. Now you notice I have to go pretty far for it to make much difference. You start seeing little dots appearing over here. So that's probably what we want to do. We've limited our mask now to that area. That's the area that's going to get changed in anything we do inside the Luma curve. I can turn off the mask now so we can see what we're going to do. Close the disclosure triangle and then go to work here in the graph. I want to bring the brightness down. It's pretty simple. I go up here and I just pull it down a little bit. Right there. And now you see, wow, we have detail suddenly in the mountain where there was no detail before. And I think that little change is all I wanted to do. Not really a dramatic difference, but it's a good difference. It puts a little more detail there without blowing out the whites, blowing out the highlights. See, let's take a look at the after and then the before. Now back to the after. I think the after is much better. So that's how the secondary color correction works. It lets you pick a region within the clip to work on here inside Luma Curve. Let me delete Luma Curve. And let's add the RGB curves, which looks for all the world like Luma Curve, except it has more controls. There are these other controls. And this lets you control the color in addition to the tonality. And it too has a secondary color correction option. So I'm going to go down here, select something different this time. I want to select the sky. So I click on the Show Mask button so we can see our mask. Click on this little eyedropper tool. Click on the sky. And right away, this is our mask. This is the area we've selected. I can try to expand that view a little bit by clicking on the eyedropper tool, the plus sign. Maybe going down here in this area, clicking there. It does expand it pretty well. Now we can open these three areas and do further refinement of what we've selected. Refinement of the mask. I think the one area that's going to make a difference is Luma. Let me expand that a little bit and see if we can include more area in the selected area for the mask. I think we got a pretty good mask now. I don't want to have it leak into the other area there, so let's see how far we can go and get away with this. Okay, there's the area that's in our mask. That's the area that will be changed if we change the color. So I'm going to turn the mask off now, go back here. Any changes we make now will affect just that area. So if I were to drop the luminance on it, it would look like that, which is not what we want to do here, but you can do that. There are various ways to adjust how this works. Let's make the blue brighter, add more blue to it. If we want to take the red out, which is kind of what we're doing, we're adding blue. It makes it even bluer that way. I want to take the green out to make it bluer that way too. There's a couple of ways to deal with that. So we can make the blue sky bluer and also change the tonality of it. But we're only changing the sky because that's what was selected inside the secondary color correction option inside this effect. All right, let's go on to the three-way color corrector. Double click on that and take a look at it. This is really the granddaddy of all the color correction effects. It's because you can control the color within three different zones, the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. It too has a secondary color correction option right there, exactly the same as the other two that I've shown you. But it also has something called the tonal range definition. When Premiere looks at a clip, it decides what falls into the range of shadows, midtones, and highlights. And you can see that by opening this up and clicking on this Show Tonal Range button. And there you go. Those are the highlights, those are the shadows, and the light gray area are the midtones. That's what Premiere Pro designates as shadows, midtones, and highlights. So any color changes you make with these wheels, if you make a color change to the shadows, it'll affect just the black areas. Make color change to the highlights, it'll affect just the white areas, and you get the midtones, right? Well, sometimes you might want to expand or contract the zone, the definition. That's something you can do here inside the three-way color corrector. So, I want to make these midtone areas here more like shadows. So I'm going to go down here and expand the view of what I'm going to define as a shadow over here to the right. And now more areas are going to fall into the shadow area. So now if I make changes to the shadows only, it'll affect all that stuff. That's what the tonal range definition does. So I'm going to turn off this little checkbox there. And now I'm going to make a change to the color here to the shadows. Let me just pull the shadows more toward red and watch how they're getting redder there, richer red. That's something you can do if you want to do this. I can, of course, change the other direction. That's not necessarily what I want to do, but I'm affecting just the area that I defined as shadows. Instead of just this black area being the shadows, I've also said these are shadows too. Even though they don't look like they're shadows, I'm saying they're shadows because that's what I want to control. And that's what the tonal range definition does. So I think you get a sense for how those secondary controls work in both tonality and color, and here in the three-way color corrector with the tonal range definition. I think you get a sense too of how the three-way color corrector works. It's really a step up from the fast color corrector. Let me just turn that off or delete it to get rid of it. I want to move on down the line to a couple of other effects that we can use that select areas within a clip, and we've touched on these before, but I just want to remind you about them. So I'm going to change the color first. The way change to color works is that you can pick a color in here and change it to something else, which is kind of nice. Go to Effect Controls. I'm going to pick a color by using the little eyedropper tool and select this yellow here. Now we're going to change it to something else. Change it to, let's say, blue, for example, like that. And then I can change it from the hue to hue and saturation, which is kind of a more comfortable way to do things. And I can change the softness, which kind of makes it a little less extreme, and other characteristics here as well that you can adjust in terms of how tolerant, how wide the area you've selected based upon the hue, lightness, and saturation. So let's change to color. I want to leave a color behind and make everything else desaturated. I'm going to decolor everything else. So I double click on leave color for this fella here. There we go. Go to you. And then it says, which color are we leaving behind? What color do we want to keep? So I click on this thing, I want to keep the purple. Then everything else I'm going to decolor. So how much do I want to decolor? That's up to this little slider here, but make everything else kind of grayscale. Get rid of the saturation there and just leave the purple behind. There we go. And then the tolerance and the edge softness and how we match colors. A couple ways of doing that. You see how that works. Now what's interesting is if I add the change to color to that one. I'm going to double click on that. Change to color. Go back here. I'm going to close leave color down for the moment. Just change to color. If I pick this one now and say, I'll check this guy here. We've left it behind and desaturated everything, but now I can change the color too if I want to. So you can make those guys work together. If I change the order it plays in, strange things happen there too. So be aware that if you do apply these two guys together, that you need to watch the order and adjust things accordingly. Let me get rid of those two by deleting them. Finally, I want to go down to Paint Bucket. Paint Bucket selects a color and lets you change it as well, but it does it based upon the edges of it, not just everything that falls into that color, not just every purple thing in the image. So I'm going to go over here to the Effect Controls, and say, what color do I want to change? Well, you define the color based upon the fill point. You click on this and you get a little target. So I want to say, I want to change that flower right there. It's just a region of color that has edges to it. So you can just make that guy different. Everybody else then will be the same. So I want to change that to some other color. For example, I can change it to red, I suppose. What the heck? We'll keep with red. Then we can say, so we want to have the blending mode be different. Have the blending mode be something like screen, for example, and it makes it blend more nicely than just kind of slapping the color on top of things. So Paint Bucket lets you change the color of an object that has edges to it, and also is defined by color. There's one more color correction technique that I want to show you. So let's go on over to the track matte key sequence. Now over the pianist's shoulder here, you can see that the windows are just a little too bright. So I want to tone them down. And I'm going to do that by using a track matte key. And I have a separate chapter on track matte key, so I'm just going to quickly run through this one. The way I do that is I need to create a mask, a graphic that covers that up. And the way I do that is I make that inside the titler. So here's how that mask looks. I'm going to turn off the view here just to show you the mask. It says these two white areas. This one's got a gradient on it. Because I want the gradient to be kind of soft around her head because her head moves back and forth. I don't want a really hard edge there where we're trying to make that bright window go away. So I just create this little guy inside the title like this little graphic. And I put that graphic on this top track. It looks like that on top. You see the graphic showing up there? And what I do is I take that graphic and embed it inside this clip below it. Now this clip below it, I've applied a Luma curve to this clip. Let me take a look at the Luma curve there. I brought down the brightness of the windows and as a result brought down the brightness of the room. If I turn off Luma curve for a second, you see that's how bright it was originally. Now I've brought it down to make a little more detail show up on the windows. So the whole thing is now darker, but I want to limit the area that's darker to just the windows. And the way I do that is with something called a track matte key right there. And the track matte key says you need to use a matte on another track. Well, the matte is right there on track 3. I need to use that with this effect. So I'm going to turn this on now, and it shows you the area that's been defined here and the area that we've toned down. And now I turn on the clip below it. Now we've affected how the windows no longer are so bright. If I turn this track off, you see that's the original, that's the changed one. Now it's not dramatic. You usually don't want to overdo things, but that just kind of drops the brightness there so you don't get too distracted by that bright window using the track matte. Now you can watch this for a second and see how their head bumping up against that gradient is not so obvious there. So there you go. That's a track matte key, and we can adjust things if we want to. We can go back to this clip here, go back to the Luma curve and open it up. If we want to make it even darker, we can, like that. But after a while, at a certain point, it gets a little obvious that we've done something horrible to that window. So I'm going to take it back up to something like that, where we've just made a subtle difference. So those are several methods that you can use to select regions within a clip and then apply a secondary color correction, be it tonality or color, to those regions.